Hi again. This is Mrs. Horner. We are going to talk today about how to finish up this collage that you've been working on. So if you look here, this is my collage. It's pretty much the way we left it the last time at the end of the last video. I just added a couple of things and I will talk about how I did that. So most of these images are just ones that I pulled off of the internet, and I added them in, and you saw me add most of them. One of the things that I was going to talk to you about is the background. So I had added this water layer as a background. I'm going to modify that a little bit. I'm going to add a little bit more to it, just to add a little bit more interest. So as you can see here, I'm adding this. I'll get rid of that one for now, but I'm adding this sort of paper. It's like crumpled paper, pretty much, that texture. So all I did to find that was do a Google search, whoops, for textures. And so literally that's all I looked up. As you can see here, texture. I pulled this one right here into my document. So if I click on it, and then once it opens up, we can even go back. Hang on, sorry. So I right click and I can hit save image as, or I can copy my image. So either way, and then I can get that into Photoshop here. If you copy it, all you'd have to do once you have your document back opened up, just hit Control V is paste. So that's what I did, and that's that there. So I kind of like the way the two images interact a little bit, but if you notice, I pulled the opacity down for this layer. So this is what it looked like when I pulled it right in. I just came up here in my layers palette and pulled the opacity down a little bit so that I see both the image of the water as well as that crumpled paper image. And I like kind of the combination of the two. I think that turned out pretty cool. So there's that. Play around with the textures a little bit. Do image searches on Google. There's all sorts of options here. I mean, the sky's the limit. Like, some of these are just fantastic images that would look really cool in some of these collages. So Google till your heart's content. There's so many options. Okay, a couple of the other things that I wanted to talk about. One of them is transforming some of these images. So right now it's just looking as though I have an image of myself and then an image of a bunch of stuff, and some of it's kind of behind me, some of it's, above me and whatever. But it doesn't necessarily look as though these images are related to me in any way. So there are a couple different ways that we're going to talk about in order to sort of remedy that situation. One of those is transforming these objects. So I'm right clicking on my object and grabbing this one. I should rename these so that I know that it's book front. If I could type, okay, so there we go. I can hit Control T is free transform, right? If you remember that, so I can resize it from there. Instead of doing that, I'm going to go to where transform lives, which is right here. So this is what we use all the time, which is free transform. So Control T. Mine's a Mac again, so it looks just a little bit different. Yours should look pretty similar. But anyway, under free transform, you see just transform. And in here, there are a lot of different options. You can use any of these if you need to, but these are the ones that we're going to look at right now. I want to kind of warp these objects so that they look as though they're kind of coming from my head a little bit. So this one, I'm just changing the perspective on it a little bit. That way I can make it look like if I move, oops, I'll hit this little check mark to accept that. I want to, sorry. No, I updated my software and I don't recommend you guys do that yet because we're having troubles with that. Just that's why that popped up. I'll move my campfire out of the way for right now. So now the book looks like a little bit more in perspective with the image of me. So you can do that. You don't necessarily have to do that with all of your images because maybe like my pizza is going to stay way up here, and then that way it would probably stay in this sort of shape and not be warped at all. This part of the book, maybe I just hit Command T, free transform, maybe rotate it around a little bit. I might take that one out. I haven't decided yet. It's a little bit redundant with the other book in there. but that's what I'm going to do. I'm just right clicking on a layer to select it. If you have this selected here, so if you have a check right there, keep in mind that that will affect how you select things. So if you have a check here, if I click on top of a layer, it automatically selects that layer. So that means if I click here and I wanted my macaroon layer instead of the pizza layer, it doesn't let me do that. Okay, so I like to unselect that. I don't really like that selected, but that's up to you. It's personal preference, and once you get used to it, maybe it will work better for you. But as that's unselected now, I just right click and find my layer that I want to select, and then I can move that around. This macaroon layer, of course, is too big, right? So I'm just going to hit Command T. Sorry, Control T. I think I could get that right. Command on my computer, Control on yours, and then I'll move that around, and I might change. I might tilt that over a little bit, something. One thing that you want to keep in mind, to make these images all look like they are interacting with each other, you want to make sure that there's some overlapping, okay? That way they don't just look like a bunch of different objects floating around in space, which is what would happen if I whoops, let's undo that, macaroons, if I separated them all out. So if I did something like this, they just look like they're separate objects that aren't interacting in any way, right? I want them to sort of look like they're all a part of me. And if they're all a part of me, that means, you know, they're kind of all part of the same sort of thing. So one way to convey that idea would be to make them overlap a little bit. So I will do that, kind of bunch them all up into one area. I don't have all of 15 of my images in here yet, but I will shortly. And you will before you turn yours in, right? One thing I wanted to show you too is that if you look at this image, like this image was a little bit difficult to just select and to mask out the background on, and some of yours might be that way too. If you notice down here in my mask, I'm going to click on this mask layer and I'm going to zoom in, and I'll just show you how to clean up some of that stuff. I'm hitting my space bar and pulling over, and that way I can kind of drag around in my document. Now I'm just going to edit this mask. So again, you can see that white line around my mask over here. Now, if you remember, when we're talking about masks, we say that white reveals and black conceals, right? Let's see. So let's reset my brush. Okay, so black is going to conceal part of my image. So that's why I chose black. Brush with black, okay? So black is my foreground color. That's what I want chosen. And so I'm just going to come back in and kind of clean all of this stuff up, just sort of by hand. And let's just go with that. Okay, so I can just come in. There was just that little faint outline around the edge of where my image boundary was, but I'm going to edit that. I don't necessarily love the way this has been outlined, so I might come back in and reshape this a little bit just to clean it up and make it look a little bit better. But I won't spend time right now doing that. I'll come back in. Fires are hard to select, just word of warning. Maybe they're not a great thing to include. So I don't know. I'll play with it a little bit. If I like it, then I'll leave it in. If I don't like it, I'll take it out and find a different image to add. One thing that I could do probably is get a different image of a fire, and maybe I put that down there somewhere, because the bottom of this image is just a goofy shape and size and all that fun stuff. So maybe I place it differently. Okay, I kind of like it down there. Maybe I would make it bigger. So I'll Command T, make it really big so that it fills the whole space. And then over here in my layers palette, I can just drag this down so that I put it behind myself. So I don't know, maybe that conveys a weird message. I might play with that again a little bit more. Just something to do. I'm going to hide that for right now. One other thing I was going to talk about as far as sort of combining all of these images together and making them look as though they kind of relate to one another. One thing that you can do to do that is draw something in the background, and this is just very roughly drawn. but all I did was, sorry, I have to stretch that out just a little bit, create a new layer. So just hit this button, the new layer button, and then you can draw in, I don't know, just basic shapes using a paintbrush tool. You could find some images online to add into the background as just sort of a way to tie all these things together. One of my students did sort of a splash image. Sorry about all my tabs open. I have 1,000 of them right now. So I could search for splash and have something like this on top of my head. So let's, you know, something like that. And it almost looks like a crown then because of this shape here. So you can do something like that, or whatever you'd like. Some of my other students have, let's just pull this up a little bit, have found a way to sort of open up the top of their head, which is kind of cool. One of them had it flip open, another one had a hat on and sort of a zipper in the side of a hat, and then all of these images were coming out of the zipper. One thing you could do too, just ideas here. Let's see, one of the other ideas was to just create an ellipse at the top of his head, and I'll have to probably come back in and edit this to get it to be a nice shape. I would probably actually T that, probably drag it up just a little bit, and I would clean this up so that it matches the outline of the top of my head. So I make a shape there, and maybe even right-clicking on the book, I will Command T that to make for free transform. Pull it in, and let's pull this up. I'll hit Enter to accept that change. Pull this up on top of that ellipse layer, and I could do something like that. Again, that would have to be cleaned up, and I would actually probably include a little bit of my hair on top of the side of my ellipse over here, just to make that idea kind of come across a little bit more fully. So I might work on that. I haven't decided exactly how I'm going to finish mine, but that's one idea too. Another idea is to just kind of cover up the top of your head with these images, and that's fine too. That's up to you. One thing that I want to make sure that you don't forget to do is add your hand-drawn elements. So this is one of my hand-drawn elements. If I wouldn't leave this background, this blue paintbrush just like that, but if I clean that up a little bit, I would add that, or I would count that as one of my hand-drawn elements. Okay, let's see. One other thing that I ran into trouble with, and I wanted to just mention to you guys, is I was trying to resize one of my objects. So I was playing with, I think it wasn't this one, but it was a different one. Let me just undo that. And I was trying to resize it or move it around, and it wouldn't work along with the mask, but it was because I had unclicked this little link right here. Because notice now I can move the mask around, but I'm not moving the actual image around. Or I can do the other way around. So I can move the image around without moving the mask. And that is a problem because there's a reason why you messed it out. So just make sure that remains linked right there. You can see that link. Okay, once you're all done, you can save this and submit it. Save it as a PSD file on your computer, but then when you submit it into Classroom, go to File. You can go to File, Export. Let's go Save for Web. This is a little bit different than what we've done before. You can save it as a GIF if you want, or a JPEG. But what I recommend is getting this size. It tells you right here what the size is. Let's get that way down. So maybe go down to 25%, somewhere around there. Like, watch what happens if I go GIF. That's still huge. So somewhere in that, let's see, original is 1.51. Now my GIF at 25% is 286K, so that's way smaller. So that's what I would do. All right, there you go. Save it as your name, first name, last name, collage. Okay, thanks. See ya.